Okay, we're going to start off strong with that stack of unknowable books. We're going to talk about what books I've finished reading, what I'm working on throughout the year, and a update on that, as well as what I am currently reading. So let's go ahead and get started, but first let me put this stack of books down before I drop them all. Hello and welcome back. My name is Nicole, and let's talk some books. This week with my books, I'm going to be talking about the soul, beauty in the world, and the drama that can be found in both. And I'm going to start out by talking to you about what I have recently finished. And the first book we're going to discuss is all about dead souls. And that probably sounds a lot more gothic than the book itself is. And the work I am talking about is Dead Souls by Nikolai Gogol. This is a work of classic Russian literature, and I just finished it this week. I did annotate it as I went along. You will see there are some post-it notes in here. This translation is the Robert A. McGuire translation, and I will come back to that because I do have some thoughts about this translation of the book. This is an unfinished work, so as the book goes along, you do start to have gaps in the story, you have sentences that are cut off, and you do have an unfinished ending, as in like somebody's in the middle of talking and the text ends. However, I will say that you should also know that even though this is an unfinished work, you do get a very strong sense of where the theme of the book is going, even if you don't know how the plot line resolves. But I would also say that it is metafiction. And metafiction, if you're unfamiliar with that term, is just a term that talks about when a work of fiction reminds you and talks about how it itself is a work of fiction. This book follows the typical sort of beginning of a story where an unknown man comes to town and he is a charmer. His name is Chichikov, and he starts charming the pants off of every well-known politician and member of the provincial aristocracy. He just becomes so welcomed. He gets invited to dinner with everybody, and as he travels about town, sort of getting everyone to, love and be in awe of him, he also goes out into the countryside to visit the aristocracy and start buying up their dead souls, as one is wont to do when you go to a dinner party. And nobody questions this until they do. And then at that point, the story really takes off as people start to question, why is he buying dead souls? And who exactly is this guy? A millionaire? A brigand? A military veteran? Napoleon himself? Well, if you want to know the answers to the sometimes ridiculous questions that are asked, you will need to keep reading to the end of this book. Dead Souls traverses a variety of different topics, including the concept of what is fiction and whether fiction should talk about reality or life as we know it and what we truly observe, or should just be completely made up. It looks at class in terms of whose story is worth telling. There's a lot of discussion of government operations, particularly on the local provincial level. So let's discuss what I felt like were some highs about this book. He is making fun in this book of writers, of how they write their books, of this idea of romantic literature, of looking at just high society. He pokes fun at high society in Russia itself, the ridiculousness of everything that everyone is doing, and the way that they're writing about it, and just sort of this romantic vision that there is of Russia and of the Russian people and of Russian culture, and how that romantic vision is largely looking at just the upper classes in Russia, in the cities, and just how that may or may not be where the action is really happening. There are a lot of things about this that remind me of some of the topics that Tolstoy comes up with in War and Peace, and I can see the connection that there is between these two works. But I love the fact that he has decided to center this story completely out in the countryside. You can't escape it, and you can't escape the satire. Even when you're getting descriptions of what the road and the countryside looks like as Chichikov drives along, he can't help but just poke fun at the way that people write about it. And you will just get those moments over and over again. This book is just one intrusive narration after the next, and I really enjoyed that. The other aspect of this book that I really enjoyed was when he satirizes how, information is spread, if you will. I'm talking about the rumors. There are rumors in this book throughout where he just shows how out of proportion something can be blown when, people cease to ask questions of the people around them. And the rumor mill in this unnamed town that will never be named, as he constantly reminds us, is astounding. They will go from the smallest scrap of evidence and blow it up into the biggest town scandal, and I enjoyed every last second. However, I did have some lows. One of the lows about the writing itself was the pacing. I felt like the pacing in this book started out really well, and I was very intrigued by what was happening. I kind of followed him along. I got the sense that we were going to follow Chekhov through all his sort of different dramas and situations. And then he got on the road and the pacing just ground to a halt. I felt like we spent way too long out in the countryside with him with nothing happening and nothing moving the plot forward, even though it should have. And while there is a purpose in the visits that he's making, I think the pace that they were done at really brought the book down. And it's something that I think if this had been finished and continued to be edited, some of those scenes would probably have been edited down to keep the pace going. Another low for me, I think, really honestly, was this translation of the work. Like I mentioned, there was a middle portion of this book that started to feel really slow, and I ended up switching to the audiobook because I just started to get to the point where I ceased to care and like didn't know where this story was going. And I put on an audiobook just to sort of get myself through the end, and all of a sudden found myself enjoying it. And I thought maybe it's because the audiobook is reading it faster than I am. Maybe it's because I stopped annotating. And I went back to annotate the parts in the audiobook that I was listening to chapter by chapter. And I started to realize that the translation of the audiobook I was listening to was very different than this translation. Unfortunately, my audiobook didn't say which translation it was using, but it was significantly different in points. And the way that it was different is that my audiobook was actually funny. A lot of it just boiled down to word choice. I think this particular translation was a lot more dry than the book is supposed to be. I do have other translations of this work, and having gone through that end experience with the audiobook, I will try a different translation. So that said, a low for me was definitely this particular translation. So I would maybe start with a different translation first, and if you're not enjoying it, try an audiobook and see if you can find what translation they're liking if you like the audiobook better. In the end, I did still give Dead Souls 3.5 stars, and I would recommend this book. I think it would have gotten more stars if I had listened to the audiobook the entire time, or again, just a different translation. There were a lot of things to enjoy about this book, and I would recommend it to anyone who is interested in thinking about themes like what is life really about, what is really important in life, because I do think those are topics rather that get explored in this book. And I think the idea of materialism is also talked about in this book. And I think anyone who enjoys Russian literature and enjoys metafiction particularly would find this a fascinating read. The next book that I finished is Invisible Man by Ralph Ellison. I have all sorts of thoughts to share on this. I did a read along on this in the month of January, and I will be doing a standalone video reviewing this entire book, so stay tuned for that, but I don't want to spoil my thoughts on it here, so you'll just have to wait for that video to come out. It will come out in February, probably in the next week or two, so keep an eye out. I want to talk about and update you on where I'm at in my year-long reads. So the first work that I'm going to talk about is The Pillow Book. This book is written by a female courtier in 10th century Japan. It is her personal observations about what life was like in the court. It's almost a book of list. It kind of reminds me of the list, if you've read Orbital, that you find in there, where she's just listing her thoughts on different things. The whole book isn't lists. There's stories, there's paragraphs of things, but there are sometimes just short lists. And each of these sections is her observations on life. And there are different types of observations and different types of lists and different types of brief observational accounts, if you will. So she will talk about things that are seasonal that she likes in different seasons. She will talk about mountain names that she likes. There are things that make you feel nostalgic, things that make you feel cheerful, things that make your heart beat fast. and occasions that induce half-heartedness, infuriating things. And it's such an interesting insight because some of them are just very different from what you might find infuriating yourself, but give you really great insight into what they found beautiful or what they found infuriating during that time period. And then some of the observations are extremely relatable and bring you right into that moment. And you know exactly what she's talking about because you also have experienced that same thing and that same feeling. And so it's really neat to be able to have that connection as well as to see the disconnect. I am really enjoying it. And I'm actually finding that this book is inspiring me, one, to want to be more observant, but two, to maybe start my own book of observations. Because at the end of the day, that's what I would say the pillow book is all about. It's that book that you have by your pillow at night where you write down all your delightful observations of the day. And it's really interesting to see what her observations are. The other book that this book kind of reminds me of is Ross Gay's Book of Delights. I have not read that yet, but I have heard that that is a book of essays about things that he found delightful throughout the year, as well as things that he felt were delightful, as in taking the light out of something. I actually wonder if he's read the Pillow Book, because I can see how there's some similarities between the two. The next book that I am in the middle of is Clarissa, and I am working my way through this behemoth in a read along with you guys through the rest of this year. We started on, I would think it was January 4th or January 10th, and we'll be reading this all the way till sometime in mid-December. So if you did not start with us, you have plenty of time. In January, we just read the January letters. And currently we have only read from page 39 to 54. So 15 pages. So if you feel like, oh, I should have started that with you, who are you? But you can still join. It's only been 15 pages. I will put the link to the read along down in the description box below. And like I said, I am reading these letters in here because this is an epistolary novel, and we are reading the letters on the day that they are dated. So the next letter that we have to read isn't until February 20th. But before you commit to a super long book, you may want to know what this book is about, so I will give you a quick synopsis. As I mentioned, Clarissa is a work of classic literature by Samuel Richardson. It was written during the British Enlightenment period, I think is what it would be considered. And it is written all in letters, and it is about the life, loves, and losers in Clarissa Harlowe's life. And I think that about sums it up. It is about her day-to-day life, more or less so, because she does skip some days, that she shares with her good friend Anne Howe as she traverses the family drama that's going around surrounding her questionable suitors. And man, does this girl have suitors. If you took nothing away from those first like 13 or so pages, it's that everybody wants to marry Clarissa. If a man walked into the room, he probably wanted to marry her. But either way, she is struggling with what to do while maintaining her virtuous reputation, and she is struggling with our antagonist Lovelace, as is pretty much her entire family. So these first 13 letters, very exciting. It starts right with a bang. You get right into the action, and things are very, very quickly falling apart. This is definitely like in the middle of something is when her letters begin. And in fact, her letters begin so much in the middle of the action that she actually has to back up and explain how they got to this point real quickly. And yeah, and then we've left her off. It's really exciting to read this book in this manner because it's leaving us with cliffhangers. Like right now, her last letter that we read, I think was dated January 15th, 20th. Yeah, I think January 20th. And we have to wait a whole month before we get another letter from her. So if you like to get mail and read it or read other people's mail, you might want to join us in reading Clarissa. I am currently about halfway through reading this book, Year of Wonder by Clemency Burton-Hill. This is a classical piece of music for every day of the year. I started this last July, I believe, and am working my way to the beginning. I like it that the pages in here are dated, but not by day of the week. So you can start and pick this book up anytime during the year. So we've made it back around to January. There's a couple other people on Discord who are discussing this with me. I'll put the link to that down in the description box as well. The links only stay good for about 7 days. So if the link doesn't work, just leave a comment and let me know, and I'll provide you with the new link to the Discord. But yeah, I wanted to start sharing more regularly on here how I'm doing going through this book. And this month, I'm going to share with you my 4 favorite songs that I listened to so far. The first one is by Beethoven, and interesting fact, this was the song that got sent into outer space in 1977 on a record. So that if aliens that have a record player ever find it, they can get a sense of what type of music we make here on Earth. You know you've made it musically if humans have decided your music needs to be shared with the universe. My second favorite piece was the piece that was shared for January 10th, and it's my favorite because it's Baroque music, and apparently that's my favorite type of classical music. It's also Baroque music on a lute, and that's just an astounding combination for me, apparently. January 19th brought me another favorite, and this one really surprised me. This is a piece that is really outside of what I typically like, but is probably for fans of Philip Glass, if you know who that is. And the other thing that I would say about this piece is if you listen to it, stay to the end. It's something that you have to listen to in its entirety to appreciate, especially if it's not your typical type of music. So give the whole thing a try before you judge it. January 25th brought me another favorite, and will probably be one for you as well. Was the greatest inspiration for Bob Dylan's lyrics. So that's some of the fun that I have gotten out of this book this month, and I'm happy to share it with you. As of the posting of this video, or really the filming of this video, this is what I'm still reading. Am I still reading it by the time you're watching this? I don't know. Go check my shorts. That's where I'm putting what I'm currently in the middle of. Here it is again, one last time. This is my stack. The top 2 are the books that I have finished since my last weekly reading wrap-up, and the other ones are all ones that I am working on either throughout the year or hope to finish soon. And yeah, I am enjoying this, by the way. I've already laughed out loud and cried because I was laughing so hard at least once or twice. And that's it for me. Let me know how your week of reading went, how your month of reading went, and yeah, what you're hoping February will look like. And I will talk to you next time.